Hello students and welcome to this IB Business Management exam tips video. In this video we're going to be talking about AO2s. We're going to talk about what are AO2s and we're going to talk about how you can get better at answering AO2 questions. So just here's a quick summary about what AOs are. In the IB Business Management syllabus, there are 4 AO1s, AO1, 2, 3, and 4. In a previous video, we looked at AO1s. In this video, we're going to look at AO2s, which is called Link to the Case Study, and these are normally worth 4 marks. So the AO2 questions will always begin with one of the AO2 command terms, and these are listed on the screen. They are analyze, apply, comment, demonstrate, distinguish, explain, suggest. Now, I'm not going to go through every one of these in detail, but you can see here on the right are the kind of definitions of the command terms. And I would say the one I see most often is explain, which is give a detailed account, including reason or causes. And the key word here is detailed. So rather than in AO1, when we were giving information and knowledge, here we need to give more detail. And we're going to go through how we do that. So just to summarize, AO2 questions, these test knowledge of the syllabus, so what's in the textbook, plus application of the knowledge to the case study. Now I'm going to give you some examples, but here, the first one, knowledge of the syllabus, this is actually AO1. So AO1, remember, was just knowledge of the textbook. So in AO2s, we need to also know knowledge of the textbooks. And that's why AO1 skills are so important. But also, we're now going to have to apply this knowledge to a case study. So hopefully in your classes, you've seen a case study. This is where you get information about a business, and then you answer questions on that. These questions come up throughout papers 1 to 3. And they're worth 4 marks. So 2 example questions, which I'm going to be using in today's video. One, explain 2 advantages for J Palace operating as a partnership rather than a sole trader. Our command term here is explain, which we just went through a minute ago. And here we're looking at what's beneficial for J Palace to operate as a partnership. Now there, you need to know the knowledge. You need to know the pros and cons of partnerships. But you also are going to have to apply it to this business called J Palace. Now, you don't have the J Palace case study in front of you, but in the question, you will be given that case study. Secondly, distinguish, here's our command term, between Carter Carr's use of horizontal and vertical integration as a form of growth. So horizontal and vertical integration is part of the syllabus. You need to know it. And again, we'd be applying it to Carter's cars. So how are these marked? Well, these are marked out of 4, like I said. So using the example of explain 2 advantages of J Palace, there would be 2 marks for advantage 1 and 2 marks for advantage 2. So for advantage 1, there'd be 1 mark for the explanation, so the correct advantage, and there'd be 1 mark for linking it to the case study. The same for advantage 2, there'd be 1 mark for identifying a correct advantage of operating as a partnership, and then there'd be a 2nd mark linking it to the case study. So you're going to get 2 marks for advantage 1, 2 marks for advantage 2. If you look horizontally, there's also 2 marks for the explanation. These are your AO1 skills, your knowledge, and there's 2 marks for linking it to the case study. Now, I would say for my students, the biggest issue I see with test-taking skills is students often forget to link it to the case study. So they know the knowledge, they know the explanation, they know the advantages, but they might just forget to link it to the case study. Now, the problem with this is that's 2 marks. That's 2 marks gone. And if you do this multiple times, that builds up and can cost you a lot of points in a test. So here are 5 AO2 tips to hopefully get you better at answering these AO2 questions. First one is the same as the tips for AO1. And again, it's not very helpful because you need to know the syllabus anyway. But I can't stress this enough. You need to learn the syllabus as well as you can. So again, like I said in the previous video, work on your study skills, learn the syllabus, learn the knowledge, learn the pros and cons of all those things that you learn. Because at the end of the day, the AO1 knowledge, there's 2 marks for the AO1 questions. And like I said, in the AO2 questions, 2 of the 4 marks are for knowledge, which is AO1. And when we get to AO3 as well, there's marks available for knowledge as well. So learning the syllabus is fundamental. So Oh, that just summarizes what I said. So 2 marks for advantage 1, so there's AO1 marks there. So moving on to AO2 tip 2, using the peel structure. This is probably the most important thing from the whole video. And if you can do this successfully, it is going to help you so much during tests and exams. So you may have seen the peel structure before. If you're not, I'm going to briefly summarize what it is. So in this question here, explain 2 advantages for J Palace operating as a partnership. You're going to have to go through 2 advantages. For both of these advantages, you want to use the peel structure. Okay, so you're going to write 2 peel paragraphs, one for advantage 1, one for advantage 2. What is peel? Now, different teachers teach this in different ways. I've seen different people do this differently. This is how I teach it to my students. So you're going to write, for a peel paragraph, you're going to write 4 sentences. The first sentence, you're going to make a point. Here, you're going to say what one of the advantages is. So the point might be one advantage of operating as a partnership is blah, 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 blah. The second sentence, you're going to explain what you mean by the first sentence. Just go into more detail about the advantage. The third sentence, you're going to say why it's an advantage. So this is an advantage because. And then the fourth sentence and maybe fifth and sixth sentences, you're going to then link it to the case study. So you can say, as you can see in the case study, we can see this advantage at work from this paragraph here, for example. And then you're going to do the same for the second advantage. And what you can do is you can write 4 sentences for each advantage. So the first peel paragraph will be 4 sentences. It could be more, could be less. But in general, if you write 4 sentences, then that should ensure that you give enough depth in the answers. And if you remember what explain meant, it meant give a detailed account. So by writing 4 sentences, you're going to give enough detail, hopefully, in your answers. What I've seen some students do before is they'll put peel in the margin. So in the margin, they'll put P, E, E, L. And then next to each of those letters, they'll write 1 sentence. And what that does is it helps to remind them that they need to use the peel structure. And they need to make a point, they need to explain it, they need to explain it more, and then they need to link it to the case study. Just a quick note, other teachers will teach peel differently, but basically you're just making sure you write enough and give depth to your answer. There are other paragraph formats available. You don't have to use a peel structure, but it's one that I teach and my students use very successfully. As I said at the beginning, if you learn one thing for doing AO2s, learn this, because it ensures you give depth to your answer and it ensures that you link to the case study, so you're ticking most of the boxes. Okay, the last 3 tips are less important, but still are going to help you. The third tip is use more than the business name. So just behind my face here is the word name. So what does that mean is you need to link to the case study. So again, like I said, you need to link the advantage to the case study. But if you just use the name of the business or the owner's name, that is not linking. Just using the name of the business is not making a link. You need to come up with something that's individual to the business in the case study. So, for example, in the J Palace case study that I do with my students, it says Keith trained in Hong Kong at a kitchen in a 5-star hotel, whilst Kelly worked as a manager at another London restaurants. So what you can do here is you can clearly link this as an advantage. So one of the advantages for J Palace operating as a partnership is that they can share the roles and responsibilities rather than one person doing it on their own. And you can clearly see that that's going to link here, where Keith can obviously focus on the food and become and specialize in that, whilst Kelly can specialize in the management of the restaurant, including being the in-house manager. And so you don't want to quote. I would paraphrase this, use your own words, try to quote as little as possible of AO2s. But here you're going beyond just using the name of the business. Okay, tip number 4 is using the correct knowledge to use. So I'm just going to push myself up a bit. So in this situation, explain 2 advantages for J Palace operating as a partnership. There are multiple advantages. So on the right-hand side, this is a table I use with my students. There are so many pros of operating as a partnership. Here I've got they can share the roles and responsibilities. There's more input in decision-making and losses can be shared between partners. And there are more advantages than this, but these are 3 of the main ones. So because you've got to give 2 advantages, which 2 do you choose? And it can be difficult to do that. And one important skill is choose an advantage which you can link to the case study. So maybe the case study has something about decision making, in which case you can link that. Or maybe the case study talks about how each of the partners has a different role in the business, and therefore you can link the first one. And otherwise, if you don't do that, if you choose a pro, then it can be very difficult to link it to the case study. It can be very difficult to get that link mark. So, for example, this is exactly the same example as I gave before. Keith trained in Hong Kong in a kitchen, Kelly in the restaurant. Now we can clearly link that to the first advantage. And so we could start off by saying one advantage operating as a partnership, the partners can share roles and responsibilities within the business. And I can then clearly link this to what's here. So when you've got a choice of which ones to use, try and pull one of the advantages that you can clearly link in the case study. On to the final tip, and this is more about presentation. So for the same question, I would write this as 2 paragraphs where you've got 2 advantages. Don't write one very long paragraph. Remember, each advantage is going to be 4 sentences or more. So in total, that's 8 sentences. If you write this all as 1 paragraph, it can end up looking like this in the photo. And if you write it as 2 paragraphs, you can see that you break it up into 2 different paragraphs. You can also work on the presentation in other ways. Start the first paragraph with the first advantage, the second paragraph with the second advantage. This signposting makes it a lot easier to look at, a lot easier to read, and a lot easier to mark. And basically, when we're looking at student work, if it looks good, then it's just a lot easier to read and to follow what's going on. So the presentation can make a big difference. Right, and I would do that throughout your test and exam paper in every single subject. Okay, that's it for this video about AO2s. I'll see you in the next video.